Walls, the president of the Louisville Forum. Welcome to our September 2025 program. The Louisville Forum programs typically meet at noon on the second Wednesday of every month here at Vincenzo's in downtown Louisville. All are welcome. Founded in 1984, the Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group. We host debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that impact the greater Louisville community. For more information about the Louisville Forum, our events, to join or to make a reservation, please visit us at louisvilleforum.org. Now on to today's topic. Zooming out on Louisville's economy, opportunities and challenges. Of Kentucky's $220 billion annual gross domestic product, Louisville makes up over 1/3 of that total. Recently, the city announced that Louisville airports combined contributed nearly $13 billion in economic output and 90,000 jobs in 2024. GE also announced an almost $500 million investment in its manufacturing here recently for the production of washers and dryers, creating 800 new jobs at its largest U.S. manufacturing site and global headquarters. This month, I'm sure if you're looking around downtown, you see all of the buzz. There are several music festivals and other events that are expected to draw nearly 400,000 people and generate more than $42 million for the local economy. There is lots to celebrate about Louisville's economy and its contribution to the state, but it is not without its threats or opportunities for improvement or growth. Of late, chiefly, deglobalization, tariffs, inflation, and workforce talent challenges. Today, we're diving into Louisville's economy as well as its overall impact on the state, and we are pleased to welcome several great panelists with us. First is Ashley Watts. In November 2019, Ashley was named the president and CEO for the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, the state's largest business association. Ashley joined the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce in November of 2012 during her tenure as Senior Vice President of Public Affairs of the Chamber. She's led several efforts in passing significant pieces of legislation, such as felony expungement, right-to-work legislation, worker compensation reform, unemployment insurance reform, and tax reform. Ashley serves on a number of local, state, and national boards and was appointed by Governor Andy Beshear and confirmed by the Kentucky State Senate to serve on the Energy Planning and Inventory Commission, where she was also elected as chair in 2025. She currently resides in Frankfort with her husband Ryan and 2 children, Emma and Carter. Thanks for joining us today, Ashley. Next up on the far end, we have with us Trevor Paul. Trevor was named the first permanent CEO of the Louisville Economic Development Alliance in February 2025. Trevor brought with him more than 15 years of economic development experience to Louisville and previously held key leadership positions at Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the Detroit Regional Chamber, and most recently at the state of Michigan, where he served as Michigan's inaugural Chief Mobility Officer and led more than 80 public-private partnerships, securing over $480 million for next-generation transportation projects. In 2023, he and his wife, Jessica, traveled with their 2 children to over 16 countries, a sabbatical that broadened his perspective on economic development and ultimately led him here to Louisville. Our third panelist, Clark Welch, is the Vice President of Economic Development at Greater Louisville, Inc., or GLI, Louisville's Metro Chamber of Commerce and Regional Economic Development Organization. Prior to joining GLI in February of 2023, Welch worked in D.C. at a global real estate services company, as well as both an International Economic Development Council and the European Commission, giving him a breadth of experience in national and international economic growth strategies. Notably, Clark started his career working in economic development here in Louisville for the Louisville Downtown Partnership in 2010. Clark lives here in Louisville with his wife and 2 daughters. Thank you both, Trevor and Clark, for being with us today. Now, to kick off today's program, I want to give each of you a brief opportunity to kind of give us your overview, elevator pitch, if you will, on Louisville's economy, both state and local economy. And Ashley, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for having me. This is the first time I've spoken before the Louisville Forum, and I'm honored to be here. I love coming to downtown Louisville and seeing what a vibrant city it is. I'm actually hosting about 100 other chamber professionals this weekend in Louisville, and I'm so excited for them to see everything at Bourbon and Beyond, and we're going to Churchill and Angels Envy, and it's just a great time to be in Louisville. So to kind of talk about the economy, and I think I'm going to let Trevor and Clark kind of talk about more about Louisville's economy. I'm going to scope out a little bit and talk about Kentucky's economy. And how I always start talking about the economy is that our economy is really a two-sided coin. There is the jobs and the economic development and all the things we're going to talk about in a minute. And then there's also workforce. And it kind of doesn't work unless both sides are working. So let's start with kind of the nuts and bolts of the economy. And I will say in just the last couple of days, I've updated my notes quite a bit because there's been recent job reports that have been a little underwhelming. And so I think that's important to talk about as we're kind of finishing this 2025 year. And so right now, I think if I had to say one word when we talk about the chamber and talk about Kentucky businesses, when looking at the overall economy, it's going to be uncertainty. And as you all know, businesses don't love uncertainty. That is not where businesses thrive. And we've seen some uncertainty in the market. We've seen some uncertainty in the economy and in some of the policy decisions that have been come down from Washington, D.C. And you're now starting, now that we're in September, with the latest jobs report, you're starting to see some of that show in the data. There is good news though, and then we also see kind of some of it dampening. The good news is that Kentucky's economy in 2025 has grown, but the data is showing some signs of slowing. Between January of this year and July of this year, Kentucky employers added over 20,000 new jobs. This is more than twice the number added during that same period in 2024. So that's the good news, that we are continuing to add jobs. But most of that growth, around 65%, came from the first quarter of the year. And actually, just last month, we actually saw job loss in Kentucky for the first time. So I've been talking about the economy and workforce for the last 4 or 5 years, really since COVID. And I used to always say in Kentucky, we have about 2 open jobs for every 1 person looking. Now we have about 1 open job for every 1 person looking. That is still better than the national average, where we've now seen those numbers reverse, where there are more people looking for jobs than jobs available. The good news is that here in Kentucky, we actually have over 2 million jobs on record, and we surpassed that historic number in 2023. So we are still growing, we are still outpacing where we were, but these last couple of months have shown some signs of slowing down. And people always ask, why is that? And it's kind of just a myriad of issues. A lot of it is that uncertainty. And I know many of you all are in different industries throughout here in Louisville. And when you're uncertain about the economy, maybe you're not going to take that extra investment. Maybe you're not going to add on that other project, or maybe you're not going to hire on that new team. You might just want to wait and see kind of where the economy is landing. And that's what we're hearing from businesses every day, is that most things are still going okay. The jobs are getting filled, but there's just that uncertainty that's kind of keeping them from growing. And so that's where we've been working really closely with the state on the things, the policies in Frankfort. I will say the good news, and I'm going to talk more about this in just a second, of tariffs and some other things that are impacting those numbers, is that Kentucky actually is doing better as a state than the rest of the nation. Like I just told you with jobs, we have 1 open job for every 1 person looking. Things here in Kentucky are going better, and I think a lot of that is credit to what has happened with the General Assembly and in Frankfort the last couple of years. We've been able to lower our individual income tax here in Kentucky. We've been able to pass pro-growth policies that have attracted businesses to Kentucky, have retained our businesses in Kentucky. And I think that's what probably Trevor and Clark will mention, all the economic boom in Kentucky, really because of really strong pro-growth policies here in Kentucky. But just to shift a little bit to talk about tariffs for a minute, because I don't think we can talk about Kentucky's economy and kind of the shifting tides in Kentucky's economy without talking about tariffs. We are now starting to see the implications from the various tariffs. I just said that Kentucky has fared better than a lot of other states when you're looking at the economy, and that is true. But when you take that as a singular issue as tariffs, Kentucky, according to many, many studies, will be hit the hardest by the tariffs. We are home to Ford, GM, Toyota. We are a manufacturing state. We are home to Kentucky's agriculture. We are home to bourbon. All of these industries are really the ones on the front lines when it comes to tariffs. And so this is not just something that we kind of pontificate about to make our case in public policy. We have seen this story happen. The last time retaliatory tariffs were put on us several years ago during the first Trump administration, our bourbon industry here in Kentucky lost hundreds of millions of dollars. We know the impact to Kentucky. We want more manufacturing in Kentucky. I always make it a point to say you can be against tariffs and also be for more growth and more onshoring here in Kentucky and here in the United States. You can be for both. We are an advanced manufacturing state. We produce cars here at Ford, at Toyota in Georgetown, at GM down in Bowling Green, but many of those cars go over the Canadian or the Mexican border 4, 5, 6 times. They're assembled here, they're finalized here, but they cross those borders many times, which every time they are taxed. So you can be for more manufacturing and more growth here in Kentucky, onshoring, and be against tariffs. We at the Chamber have been loud proponents that trade works and tariffs don't, and we're afraid that now we're starting to see some of this maybe come to play with some of these economic numbers. A lot of it is the uncertainty of tariffs, where maybe the tariff numbers, larger businesses are able to kind of absorb some of that. Smaller businesses, what we're hearing is that they're just not able to absorb that, and they're now making some difficult decisions. I did want to mention kind of that other side of the coin. I said the coin of the economy is really kind of the hard economic data numbers, the economic development numbers that these guys will talk about in a minute, and also workforce. Kentucky has for many years struggled with workforce. We struggle with workforce participation, where right now we hover at about 56% of working age able-bodied Kentuckians that are actually in the workforce. Again, this is a perfect storm as to why. We have childcare issues here in Kentucky. We have transportation issues here in Kentucky. We have a very high rate of disability here in Kentucky. We incarcerate a lot of people here in Kentucky. There's a lot of things that have added up to this perfect storm, but what we know is that we have continually dropped in workforce participation ratings, where we're now in the bottom 10 of all the states throughout the United States. So we work every single day at the Chamber along with our partners like you all in this room, the Kentucky General Assembly, members of Congress, to work on these things that will improve our workforce, to not only get some people that maybe are on the sidelines back in the workforce. How can we help that person that maybe has been in recovery or been incarcerated get back in the workforce? How can we help new Kentuckians into the workforce? How can we help people like myself who are working moms with childcare? How can we kind of have this collective effort to where we're really focusing in on workforce, as well as attracting new people through economic development incentives and all the work that they're doing. And so I think when you look at our economy, things right now are still pretty strong. The numbers these guys are going to talk about are really impressive, and Louisville is doing its fair share of work of helping keep Kentucky's economy going, and we're so thankful for that. But there are some things on the horizon that I think we need to be cautious about, be vocal about, and work through legislative action, programmatic action, community action to really try to tackle before some of those numbers get worse than they do.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for that overview and preview, I think, of a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. Just going down the line, Clerk, I'll move to you next to talk about your view on Louisville's economy.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for everybody for coming today. Again, I'm Clark Welch with GLI. So GLI, for those who may not know, encompasses a geography that's 15 counties. And so that crosses the river into southern Indiana, 5 counties in southern Indiana, as well as 10 counties in Kentucky. So pretty closely aligned with the MSA, although not identical. There's a few counties that differ from our MSA as defined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I echo a lot of what Ashley shared in terms of macroeconomic trends that we're seeing at the federal level, how that's trickling down to both the regional and the local level. I think when you're looking at the region as a whole, 1.4 million people, give or take, that we've so far been pretty resilient when it comes to negative impacts in the labor market. We have an unemployment rate that, while higher than 12 months ago, still is, by all historical accounts, in a pretty healthy place. It's in the low 4s, so 4.2, 4.3% is the most recent data that I saw. And I think it's going to have to inch up significantly, a point or two, before that starts moving the needle on a lot of the policy level discussions that we'll probably hit on later this morning. When you look at the regional economy as a whole, one of the things that's interesting to note about Louisville is that you think about manufacturing, you think about logistics, you think about healthcare, kind of our long-standing staples of industry that exist here. But there's actually pretty significant diversification in the regional economy. So if you look at the top 10 industries that comprise the economy regionally, those 10 industries capture a share of the regional economy that is at least 5%. So that tells me, and it should tell you all, that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. So if one industry dips or another is increasing in terms of its overall success, that when you compare us to a lot of our peers, there's less diversity. So what that results in is that economic cycles perhaps have more material effect on those regions than they do in Louisville. So I think it's reassuring to know that we've got that diversification across industry, and that typically Louisville sees the effects of national trends a little bit later in the data than some of the coasts would per se. So the fact that as a nation, the unemployment rate has remained pretty resilient, and I think you're seeing that here locally and regionally as well. I just wanted to point that out, that I think that the industry diversification and the unemployment are pointing to health. When we look at sort of the overall economic development pipeline of opportunity, we at GLI have not seen a material shift upward or downward in terms of opportunities that are looking. It's been very healthy for the first half of the year. And I have to say, like, if I was looking at it personally in January, February, I had some unease. I didn't know what some of these federal shifts in policy were going to mean as a result on the local and federal level. And through September, we have seen a pretty consistent deal flow regionally. So I think that's reassuring. One of the things that my eyes are wide open to is companies that may have been looking and haven't made a decision yet. So if we had, I always joke that economic development has the longest sales cycle of almost any industry out there. So some of these things can go on 12, 18, 24 months. And so a lot of the projects that may have already had traction a year and a half ago, you're starting to see the throughput of that. It'll be interesting to see 12 months from now, the companies that are deciding to make investments or not make investments, what does that look like when we look at Q1 or Q2 of 26? And the verdict's still out on that.
Thank you so much. And Trevor, I'll let you bring us home on your overview of Louisville's economy. No pressure.
No pressure, though. Hi, I'm Trevor. How's everybody doing? I'm about 6 months in. I'd never been to Louisville before the interview process. And I should say, I think I used the YouTube video from the forum in my interview process. Well, so these stats, if someone's watching out there and you're trying to get a job here in economic development in Louisville, these stats are really helpful. I got to say, for not having been here, clearly I thought of Louisville as a place that had provided rich cultural contributions. In that way, I think I thought about it more as a brand than I did a city. But then once I got on the ground here, I realized that this place is at the epicenter when it comes to the future of logistics, the future of EVs, the future of kitchen appliances, future of food, future hospitality. I could keep going. Over these 6 months, it's been a wave, man. I look at where we were at last year, January to today, in terms of new capital investment. We were at about 109 million. It's strong. It's good. This year, same time frame, January to today, 2.89 billion. That is not only more than the whole calendar year of 2024. If you add 2023 and 2022 to that, then you begin to hit what we've only done in a few months, 3.5 months to go this year. But that's not even the most exciting part. I think the most exciting part is these big transformational investments that you're seeing. These are not just an extension of existing products because there is market demand. We're creating new systems. If you would have told me as a Detroit guy that you're going to take this job in economic development, and within the first 6 months, the assembly line would be reinvented in the city that you took the job in, you'd be like, home run. And that's exactly what happened here with that Ford investment. we're not only building a car, we are changing the way cars are built. The new way, the assembly tree, has the front of the car being built in its entirety, the middle of the car being built in its entirety, and the rear of the car being built in its entirety and coming together at the end. And you know what? If it works, it's going to compete with Asia, and it's going to reignite our auto industry. And if it works, much like the assembly line back in Detroit, you're going to see competitors want to come to Louisville. You're going to want to see more suppliers come to Louisville, because guess what the heaviest part of an EV is? The battery. And Louisville was chosen because it's extremely convenient. Our logistics system is one of the best in the world. And we're right between Marshall, Michigan, and Louisville. And so, if you can bring the cost down in the supply chain, it's likely going to be because you located in Louisville. Now, Clark mentioned diversity. We clearly have a manufacturing right to win. No question about it. And he's right. We have leadership positions in the production within 10 industries. Where we need to raise our game right now is going vertical in those industries, getting more R&D, more engineering, more creative, getting more stops along the value chains. And I think that's the goal. So when I see a company like Texas Roadhouse, who just passed Olive Garden as the market leader in casual dining, choose to double down here, that's a big deal. The playbook for one of the world's fastest growing brands is going to be written right here by people who live right here. Our projects are up for Jefferson County by 27% when I checked yesterday, from this year to last year. And our pipeline is as strong as it's been in 7 years. We're at about 11.6 billion, about 3,500 jobs still on the line. We won't win them all, but I think we have a shot to win some more transformational deals this year. But the one thing I will say, at least in Jefferson County, last year we created about 4,000 jobs at this point. And right now, we're at about 2,300. That tells me that AI, wild market conditions, are affecting us too. But if there was ever a city that's bucking the trend right now, it's us. And it's not just, the GE deal's huge, man. Like, we're talking washer dryer combo units built across a production area that's 33 football fields long. How cool is that? In one of the most sophisticated factories in the world. That's incredible. That's not just a win. Those aren't just jobs. That's a whole new way of doing things that I think is going to keep Appliance Park around for another century and beyond. But then you look at some of the deals you don't hear as much about. Like Raytheon just won a $74 million deal to build defense systems for Navy ships. You think about Anthro, a Silicon Valley company who could have gone anywhere and chose to locate here. $40 million, about 120 jobs. They do electrolytes, which is not what's in Gatorade. It's actually what's in an EV. It's like the bloodstream that carries ions to charge. And domestically, we have not had a factory that can produce that at scale. Now we do, and it's right here in Louisville. V-Simple, an AI company that is building digital assembly lines. So it's not even about the physical world. We're creating leadership positions within the world of digital to help small and mid-sized companies that don't always have access to cutting-edge tech, streamline office flows. Construction companies across the river in Nebraska and Texas. The things we're doing and building right now are impacting customers of all sizes all around the world. I'll leave you with this. Before I was here, I was at a ribbon cutting, $45.5 million, Health Track RX. What they do, and this is about 200 jobs, what they do is, look, I'm so glad I didn't have to give remarks because I know nothing about molecular biology and PCR testing. But what I do know is if someone in Seattle, a patient in Seattle had to submit a test right around dinner time, that test would fly overnight while you and I were sleeping, land before sunrise in Louisville, go to this new facility. The test would be run, and before that patient woke up, their doctor would have results. That really matters. So as much as it's about numbers, it's about making the world a better place. And I got to say, there's not a mix of projects right now anywhere in the country that is doing more, I think, to make the world a better place than what's happening right here in Louisville.
Thank you, Trevor, and all of our panelists. Before we jump into audience questions, and I can see that we've got quite a few already in the queue, I wanted to just ask each of you what you think Louisville's comparative advantage in the next 5 to 10 years relative to other peer metros is, if you had to pick one.
I would say I'd start off, and this is Kentucky in general, and I think both Clark and Trevor mentioned this, is logistics. We are within 1 day's drive of 2/3 of our nation's population. It is not a coincidence that we are home to UPS and to the Amazon Air Hub. We are in the prime location, and so I'm sure when these guys are selling businesses on coming to Kentucky, that is one of the top things. And then I also think our people. I mentioned our workforce issues, but I always like to take a positive spin on that. And, we have 56% of our working age population working, but that also means we have a large chunk that are here ready to work. We may just need to help them figure out how to get back in the workforce. So I would say our logistics and kind of where we're located and our people.
I will echo that, but I think I think logistics is critically important, but it's also sort of elevated logistics. So we talk a lot internally about the integration of healthcare and logistics. So everybody thinks of Louisville as a logistics town, and it certainly is with UPS. But a handful of years ago, UPS stood up a new vertical within the company called UPS Healthcare. And what that has allowed is for Louisville to really stand out in relation to some of its competition. So there are lots of places between the coasts that have friendly people and a low cost of living. But to be able to say that you have those things, plus logistics and a competitive advantage to attract some of those life sciences businesses, it's really using logistics as a leverage point to attract other industry. And I think that's what excites me when I look 5 years ahead.
R1 University within the city limits. Logistics, not just by land, by air, by river. I think quality of life needs to be right up there. But what I will say, and I like going last because you will give all the quantitative information, and then I can just shoot it. If I'm someone that's just graduating college, and I'm feeling lost, and I'm just so fired up because I just got my degree, I'm feeling really smart, and I have the energy to change the world. I could go to an Atlanta or a Dallas, Chicago, and I would probably have a good time, but I don't know how much impact I would make. I would say per capita, you can come here younger in your life and make more impact than you could anywhere else. I think this is a new frontier. I think Louisville's next. Typically, and some have heard me say this before, frontiers are directional, like head west. But I think now it's these mid-sized cities that have brand equity, but just people don't often think about it, and now they're rediscovering. And they'd rather come here and do something meaningful quicker than go somewhere, bounce around. Now, the question I have for all of you, if you were not in your jobs today, is there an aspirational job for you? Is there some place where you're like, wow, I've always wanted this job, and now I get to go get it? Or do you feel like perhaps you'd have to settle? Perhaps you'd have to take a demotion. Perhaps you'd have to switch industries. That's the pivot point that creates population growth. We need to begin to create paths for people versus just stops for people along the way. And I think once we can do that, I think we're going to get all walks of life coming here. It's a great place to live.
Thank you. Lawrence, I'll let you go ahead with the audience questions, please.
Thank you, Caitlin. First, a little insider baseball. Originally, this was supposed to be a discussion focused exclusively on tariffs. But we like to have balanced panels. We couldn't find anyone who supported tariffs.
I really was ready to debate. No one wanted to come, so.
So we expanded it, and I'm glad we did. It's a broader discussion, but there are a couple of tariff questions. One, the Trump administration says over time, the tariffs will lead to more manufacturing coming back to this country. I'd like to get first your response to that there may be short-term pain but long-term gain.
The thing is we've just never seen that. Every time there's been tariffs, it's always kind of been a loss. And I think here in the United States, several decades ago, we decided we were going to be advanced manufacturers. And so simply put, some of the things that we need are just no longer made in the United States. We have heard from businesses here in Kentucky, smaller manufacturers that said, it'd be great if I could make this widget here, but it's going to take me 3 to 5 years to even get the concept together. It's going to cost more money. That's just putting an extra tax on Kentucky consumers. That's all this is. So like I said earlier, you can be for both. We can be for more onshoring, and our onshoring numbers in the United States have been going up the last couple of years. We can be for more companies coming to the United States, but also know that tariffs do not work. We always say we want fair trade deals. We do not want, obviously, the United States to get the short end of the stick on any trade deal. But right now, I think the negotiation part, sometimes it may work out. But what we know, and especially for Kentucky businesses of manufacturing and our farmers and our distilleries, is that tariffs do not work. And so what I always say to that is it's really hard for me as the chamber president to tell some of my small businesses, you're going to be in pain for 3, 5, 7 years, but in the end, it's going to be okay. They don't have 3, 5, 7 years to wait this out.
Yeah, tariffs do not work, and I think we hear that from our membership loud and clear. I think, and Ashley touched upon this in her opening comments, I think what's complicating things in the near term is the balance of what the tariffs will be along with the uncertainty associated with them. And so I think GLI's perspective is that we are very pro free market. We think that tariffs do not have a place, and they're not advantageous to the regional business community. And time will tell on the outcome, but I think in the near term, what's even more acute is the uncertainty around tariffs. So if it changes weekly or daily or even more frequently, that level of uncertainty causes businesses to second guess or triple guess investment decisions. And that typically results in stifled economic growth.
I don't know if the word seismic or generational, but taking the whole tariff argument out of it, there's a fundamental change going on in the systems that we use every day around the world. Autonomous systems, electrification, shared technologies, connected technologies, cybersecurity, the new types of materials we're building things with. For as much as tariffs are trying to control the dialogue right now, I think what's controlling movement of wallets is actually these changes. There are better ways coming to do certain things like faster every single day through the advent of AI, through the advent of social networks. And what you're seeing is industry respond in that way. And, when you're trying to make a bet as to where to invest, and you are looking at writing a new playbook, building a new type of factory, a new way to make something, America is still the best place to do that. And I think that's why you're seeing the reshoring fervor, more why Louisville is having a moment right now than some of the political back and forth.
One other tariff question, and I think, Ashley, you mentioned this. What has been the impact on the bourbon industry specifically? And is the slippage there due to tariffs or due to change in American tastes or both?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I mean, we know if you've turned on the news in the last several months, I mean, we saw our friends of the North, the Canadians, saying, we're taking bourbon off the shelf. It's not just going to cost more. You're not going to be able to get it in Canada. And so that is what we are seeing. We have seen this story before. We saw hundreds of millions of dollars lost in the bourbon industry the last time these tariffs were put into place. And so I do think that is a huge shift in it. Of course, consumption and consumers' tastes are changing. We know that. We have seen those trends, and I'm not going to quote any specific statistics because I don't have them in front of me, but we know that the younger generation are drinking less. They are moving to other things, and we now have, the legal marijuana in many states and some things like that. But we know that the next generation is drinking less, and so habits are changing. But when you literally have a whole country say, we're going to take your bourbon off of our shelves, you kind of know how that story ends. It's not even that it will cost more. They simply won't even be able to get it. So, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, but these tariffs are something that we could really stop right now, regardless of consumer trends.
So I just want to pipe in. I have a story. So, being from Detroit, you can see Canada. And I have a cottage in Canada still. The cottage has been in my family since the 60s. And I cannot buy bourbon.
Yeah.
Not only that, I was forced to have a rum old fashioned and the bartender apologized. He said, I'm sorry. So they don't love it either.
No,
Out there.
no.
We'll pretend like you didn't say that.
He had no choice.
I had
He
no choice.
Elizabeth?
So in recent years, we've had several high-profile losses, such as Yum headquarters. Is there an idea of why some of these companies have left Louisville and what we could have done differently or what we can do in the future to prevent that from happening?
I think the story shifts depending on the company you're talking about, but some themes that you can glean out of businesses that have decided to make investments elsewhere are, one, we hear pretty frequently, and this is even with the existing business community, is direct air service plays a role in that to some degree. I think, and Trevor, you mentioned this earlier, it's kind of like the other thing that oftentimes comes into effect is sort of what is, like, if this job doesn't continue, what is the next alternative for an individual? So it's a network, an ecosystem of industry that provides upward mobility. So I think that's played a part of it, as well as industries that have concentrated in other parts of the country that have served as draws for some companies that have historic roots in this region. I think are probably, if I had to narrow it down to 2 or 3 things that I've heard recently.
I don't think it's a Louisville trend. I think it's a national trend. I think competition is more global than ever for senior executives. The analogy that I use, and I'm going off of this notion that not enough executives live in Louisville that actually run Louisville stuff. You look at like the major leagues, you look at NBA, like typically the players on a team aren't from that city, but they represent that city and they call that city home. And so I'm more concerned about today of those executives that are making decisions here, moving here, that they are representing our city well during their time doing so. And honestly, I know that there's a couple executives that are chose to live here even though they have jobs in other places. And so it goes in the other direction. And I would look at those folks as more ambassadors than anything else. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's something that I've been asked lately, and I thought I'd comment on that aspect of it.
One thing I would mention with that too is that, a competitive tax climate does matter. We see states like Texas and Florida and other states that have lower taxes and lower income taxes growing at much faster rates. Now, it is a myriad of reasons as well why a company chooses to go one place or another, but I do think even though we have done a fantastic job in the last couple of years of lowering our individual income tax, I remember when the bill was passing in Frankfurt to lower it another 0.5% before the votes were even done, Indiana had already lowered theirs as well. And so though we are lowering ours, every state is kind of in a race to the bottom when it comes to taxes. And so we're not the only state lowering our individual income tax. Every state is really kind of working toward that. And so we've made great progress. We've improved our tax climate significantly. But I do think at the end of the day, you have to look at the tax climate of some of these states that are where our businesses are going.
And if I can just chime in on one other thing related to that. At the state level, so I think there's been general positive reception to the decreasing personal income tax over the last 2 or 3 years. We were at 5%, now we're at 4%, it'll be 3.5% come January of next year. Taxes and incentives play a small role. It's a variable among the decisions that site consultants and companies are looking at when looking at one community versus another. So while the personal income tax has come down and that's good for the employee, one of the things that we are trying, and other chambers across the state are trying to think through and advocate for as we edge into the 26th session is our kind of flagship incentive tool at the state level, the KBI, is directly tied to the personal income tax. And so if you have a decreasing personal income tax, that's watering down the value of the incentive that you have to attract businesses. So those two things are at odds, and we're trying to figure out a solution that maintains the attractiveness of our incentives while also achieving the aim of trying to lower the personal income tax.
This question may tie into your comments. This is for anyone who wants to answer it or all. Louisville is often compared to Nashville. Is this a fair comparison? If yes, in what areas should we be more or less like Nashville?
I think, I'll jump in here. I mean, I think Nashville's an obvious comparison geographically. I think size-wise, they have gotten to the place where they are 2.5 times the size of Louisville over the last 25 years. So from a population standpoint, perhaps not. But given geography, I think you have to consider Nashville a peer market. And when you look at the I-65 corridor going from Huntsville north to Indianapolis, 65 remains a healthcare corridor. And Louisville and Nashville have a lot of similarities when you're looking at healthcare as a bedrock industry in our communities. Nashville's done a better job, perhaps, of scaling healthcare in their community. But I think for comparison purposes, we have to include Nashville in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, Nashville is the city that has come up the most when we talk about peer cities. Sometimes it makes people upset. Other times it makes people inspired. But I've also heard it from people in Nashville saying we get compared to Louisville. We are beginning to look like, and we just met with some site consultants yesterday, a preferred or top shelf option to Nashville, a place that's more of an emerging center than a dated place that has been passed behind. That said, it's hard to, I think you need to pick a topic and then pick the peer cities versus pick the peer cities and then go over the topics. And to me, I would look at Chattanooga, I would look at Richmond, some of those cities that have the same percentage growth, same population, similar industries, as ones that we should be competing with because they're hungry like we are. I can't attest to the Nashville hunger. I know it's there, but I would almost equate Nashville to some of those cities I mentioned at the top, of perhaps going there and feeling like you may have gotten lost, where here you could come and make a big impact.
Is there anything that you would like Metro government to do or change to help Jefferson County grow economically?
Well, I mean, I'm a public-private partnership, a 501c6, that is a third, Metro government funded. Actually, the second third is in-kind contributions of employees and resources, and then the other third is private sector dues. So I'm half Metro government. But I can comment on it with one of the halves. I guess it's a third. I can comment on a third. But I've been really happy at how fast Metro government has been moving lately, specifically around some really custom situations where we were competing with other places, in some cases other states. If you would ask me, okay, what would I like to see more of? I would like to see more of an emphasis on building up tech clusters, attracting startups from the coasts. I'm really happy that the mayor just announced, and I came here because of the mayor. He convinced, he's a great boss, and that's a guy I can get behind. And he's a primary reason why it feels like there's so much momentum right now. But I love that he just announced a chief AI officer, which is the first of a major city. We're the first major city to do that. And that AI officer is not only going to look at making Metro government run even faster, but then also look at where can we take leadership positions, both from a policy perspective and then an execution perspective, to solve some of the really tough issues we have in this town. Yeah, I mean, we could keep going. Like I think the mayor's mindset is one of, and many people on Metro Council, is one of continuous improvement. And that's a good place to be if you're a city.
I would say, as a statewide organization, I know my place to never kind of tell localities what they should and shouldn't be doing. But we really have appreciated the partnership with Louisville and the creative kind of opportunities they have started, such as Thrive by 5 and other things like that are really kind of leading to a blueprint of a really thriving city. So we've just enjoyed the partnership.
Yeah, what would you do? What would you do, Clark?
I think Trevor said it well here. I've seen, I've been in my role for 3 years, and I think it's been encouraging to watch the proactiveness of Metro government. I think in my time there, like the general feeling of like, how do we take what we have and improve and make it better? And I think that that's really all that you can ask and hope for in local government. And so from our standpoint, I think it's been encouraging to watch Trevor and his team, as well as sort of what that looks like at the local level in terms of changes, updates that can make things better and improve. That's what we're here to do.
We have 3 questions related to education, but they're all really best summed up in this one question. What improvements in public education does Kentucky need to make to improve our workforce, including the trades? And I would include in that question both post-secondary and local school districts like JCPS.
I can start, and I think it really goes back to alignment and communication and making sure that our education community and business community are working hand in hand. And I'm happy to say that in the last 2 years, the Chamber, along with members of state government, cabinet secretaries, KCTCS, the Council for Post-Secondary Education, and some others, have formed what we call a SWAT initiative, the Statewide Workforce and Talent Attraction Team, where we literally meet every month to almost triage workforce needs in Kentucky. So every single month, the Secretary of Economic Development, the Secretary of Labor, myself, KCTCS, and Council for Post-Secondary Education meet. We talk about issues going on not only with education, but also with businesses. And I will be pretty honest, a lot of it started when Blue Oval came to Hardin County, which is my home county, that we were all kind of talking around each other. We were all talking to Blue Oval. We were all sharing the wonderful things that we could do, but we really weren't meeting their needs. And we knew that we needed to show a united front and to really triage businesses' needs individually. And so what that has led to is a great creation of pipeline management, of making sure that business is talking to education and that we're preparing the students for the jobs that we have in Kentucky. And that we're also telling students about all these wonderful jobs we have in Kentucky. What are the opportunities? What it could be the pay? What could be the mobility? And so as simple as that sounds, I think a lot of it is just communication and building that strong united front between businesses and education. And I will say it seems pretty typical here in Kentucky that we talk to our partners and we figure things out. But I will say we have talked to many of our partners in other states, and this does not happen. Everyone's talking in silos. And so by the head leaders of these organizations making a commitment to every single month, having a member of a team show up for a meeting, we now have a united front on business and education. And I'm hoping that this really leads to some transformational impact.
Yeah, I think when you look at the GLI region and Jefferson County specifically, what JCPS has done and continues to do with the academies of Louisville, where you've got 14 high schools across Jefferson County that have invested in creating programs designed to make graduates of JCPS, when they leave the 12th grade, work ready, is a tremendous way to create the talent of tomorrow. And that's what JCPS is trying to do. So if you've come out of JCPS and an academy program and the aviation program, and that's a feeder to UPS, it gives, I'll just use that as an example, it gives UPS the ability to invest in what that curriculum looks like at JCPS. And you could do the same example for any other industry and specialty. So it gives some of that real world example to high schoolers when they're trying to figure out what's next. And so for some kids, that might be college. For some kids, that might be something more vocational, and both are viable, good options. But the sooner that the school system can help kids figure out what their path is, that's good for everybody. So if you're looking at talent and JCPS, I think the wheels are on the tracks. They're doing good things. Talent in and of itself, I think, is something that GLI is focused on, doing what we can to also attract talent and educated workforce from outside of the region. So when you talk about those two things together, nurturing, growing your own talent within the community you live in, but also making a concerted effort to go get the talent you want, that when those two things come together, that's a recipe for success.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that we just heard. Just a couple, two quick points, ancillary at best. I want to see our workforce, and I want to see JCPS and our workforce development program outwit AI. Because right now, you ask AI a question and you get an answer, and then think of all the people then are involved in that value chain of activity to get that work done right now. We're heading into a world where once you ask that question, AI will do everything else. So think about 4 or 5 jobs down the line that will no longer exist. So how do we continue to outwit AI, whether you're U of L or community colleges? Very early on in my run here, I took a tour of a school, academy school, and they showed me some of the smartest kids I'd ever come across in my life. And they were going to Duke and Clemson, which is great. Go, see the world, but then come back. And so I would like to see our programs not only continue to reinvent themselves with good curriculum, I would like to see very aggressive recruitment strategies to pull them from the markets they end up in.
Quick follow-up question on education. How important or what impact does the quality of K through 12 education in the city and state have on your ability to attract out-of-state investment?
I just have a quick thing, and then I'll turn it to you. A lot of the jobs, like you're talking like 10-year incentive deals. These companies that are hiring 800 people, 500 people, 300 people. I mean, they got to build the factory. They got to set everything up. They have to wait for the PO to come in. It's a bet that you make over a decade. And so when you pick a place, you're probably going to start really hiring in year 5 and year 6. And that's why high school talent matters. So when I look at it, especially in some of these bigger, heavy industry deals, it's core. It's not always something that begins a conversation, but few conversations go without it coming up.
I echo that. I think it's also important, and this goes back to sort of the public policy advocacy side of our work at GLI is, we talked about earlier, Kentucky, no question, is a player and has been for a long time in manufacturing. So we've got the core foundation of those businesses that are here and the workforce that supports it. But Trevor, you mentioned earlier, and I agree with this, that like the R&D jobs, some of the up the vertical jobs that we want here, we have an incentive structure that's not necessarily tailored to equally attract those companies or those positions that then go in and support the manufacturing jobs that we have and will continue to have. So yes, education is important to answer the question, but I think that we also need to make some adjustments, and we have been advocating for adjustments to the incentive structure that makes it just as appealing for a manufacturing firm as an office or an R&D or some of these softer skills companies to be attracted here that we already provide to our core industries across the state.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, education is foundational to everything. And I think I would take it even a step further in saying quality childcare and pre-K is also fundamental as well. We know through our kindergarten readiness by 3rd grade literacy levels what our next workforce is going to be prepared to be. And so we know how important that is and what it leads to our next workforce. And kind of on another trajectory of this is also the talent attraction piece. I have 2 children of my own. And so when you're looking to locate somewhere, you want to locate where there are good schools, where there is good quality education. So I think it's obviously fundamental for the next generation of Kentuckians, but I also think for that talent attraction piece, a good quality education is fundamental for that as well.
What is the one factor or issue that gives you the greatest concern for our economy in the next year?
I'm always going to say workforce because it's something that Kentucky has struggled with for so many years, and we make small strides, and we're still yet in the bottom 10. And so I think that's why you see the chamber and our partners up here always talking about these initiatives that maybe 10, 15 years ago, a chamber of commerce was not leading the way on childcare or on housing or on criminal justice reform. But it's all really kind of going back to that workforce issue. And so for me, I always say, the policy sometimes issues aside of tariffs and taxes or whatever it may be, the workforce issue has been one of those issues for here in Kentucky the last 2 decades that we have just not gotten our hands, we have not tackled quite yet. And so I think that's why it's an all hands on deck approach. And I think if you ask any business in Kentucky, small, medium, large, anywhere in the state, what's the one issue that keeps you up at night? It's probably going to be workforce.
I think workforce is on the list, but a close second, if not a tie, is just talent. So we talked about all the projects that have landed or are close to landing across the region, and that's all great, but you've got to have the people to fill the jobs. And so being very intentional about what the strategy is to go find the talent and make sure that you're selling in a way that stays authentic to who you are. So, Louisville's got a tremendous culture, a great quality of life. And so being able to reinforce that brand and that message outwardly outside of the state so that other people drink the Kool-Aid and they realize that this is a great place to be, and sort of by default, those people, when they move here, embrace it, and in so doing are filling the workforce needs that the state's going to continue to have if we have these economic development win after win. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying, Ashley.
Land. We are running out of land in Jefferson County for big projects or specialty projects. So more creative assembly of land or redevelopment of it is helpful. People, we need to fill all these jobs. And these jobs are becoming more specialty. Affordable housing. If we want people to move here and build a life here, it needs to make sense. And when I say affordable, I don't mean cheap. I mean innovative. And I mean mixed use and where communities can be built. I worry that we are going to continue to attract gobs of CapEx, and the jobs number attached to the CapEx is going to continue to stay about the same because of advances in technology. So what does that mean for workforce? None of this is normal. So you don't just get like $2.89 billion in a summer or like in less than a year. At some point, we will see some sort of lull, especially with all the macroeconomics right now. And how are we going to handle that lull? So I would say the last thing is I'm waiting. What keeps me up at night is that lull. And what do we do with it as a community? How do we rally when it's time to find that new batch of companies? Or what happens when we lose and it gets out like Alabama beats us at something? Like, what do we do? Anyway. Hasn't happened yet.
Heaven forbid. Lawrence, I think we have time for just one or two more questions.
Okay. In the areas of workforce and economic development, what are your top 1 or 2 priorities for the upcoming legislative session?
For the Chamber of Commerce, we're going to be working on housing and childcare. So obviously it's a budget year, and so there's going to be a lot of asks on the table, but we're leading coalitions around childcare and housing, and those will be two of our top priorities, really all going back to workforce. We all know those are all good things. Anytime I travel around the state, and I'm sure these guys would say the same thing, the last couple of years, we just keep hearing, we'd love to attract more people, we'd love to attract more businesses, but we don't have the housing to meet those needs. And so we've led a coalition the last year to really kind of put forth a pretty large housing or childcare and housing plan. And so that's what we'll be working on this next upcoming session.
No surprise, I'm going to talk about talent again. When we look ahead at 26 and the legislative session, last budget cycle 2 years ago in 2024, the state appropriated about $250,000 to do a study as it relates to talent attraction efforts at the state level. And so that study is ongoing right now, and we're optimistic and going to be working hard to try to secure the funding from the state legislature to do a statewide talent attraction initiative. So instead of looking at just Louisville or our region, really trying to amplify that across the state of Kentucky.
Downtown, baby. I think it's time to have a healthy conversation about what we can do to supercharge redevelopment down here. Rebecca's doing a heck of a job at the Downtown Partnership. Well, let's get some tools. And then also tweaking some of our incentives, partnering with Secretary Noel in the state to make sure that we continue to be competitive, and then everything that they said.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that is all the time we have for questions. Thank you to our audience for providing those. And a big thank you to Trevor, Clark, and Ashley for joining us today. And mark your calendars for October the 8th, our next program. We will be joined by the new JCPS superintendent. So look out for an email on that soon. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.